across parts of Scotland. So a bit of a frosty start first thing on Saturday morning, but then turning increasingly wet and windy as this system makes its way and pushing northeastwards as we go through the day. As that rain hits the cold air over Scotland, we are likely to see some significant snow. Could see more than 10 centimetres in some places over the higher ground. Could cause some travel disruption here. Elsewhere, an unsettled picture, but quite mild towards the south, highs of around 12 Celsius. Looking ahead towards New Year's Eve, and for many it is going to be a blustery day. Strongest winds towards the south, risk of gales here. Quite a few showers around, but a calmer picture across Scotland. Some dry weather here and mostly light winds, though again towards the far northeast it is looking wet and windy. As we go into the beginning of the new year, it actually looks like it will be largely dry, but that may not last that long. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa, whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Former Prime Minister Liz Truss's long-awaited resignation honours list has been branded a slap in the face to hard-working people by Labour. Tory donor Sir John Moynihan, Miss Truss's Deputy Chief of Staff, Ruth Porter, and former Chief Executive of the Vote Leave Brexit campaign, Matthew Elliott, have all been recommended for peerages. The list caused controversy even before being published, with calls for the Prime Minister to block the honours because of her short-lived nature of Mrs Truss's premiership. Meanwhile, the government has also revealed a slew of separate New Year honours. England goalkeeper Mary Earps, Glastonbury founder Michael Eavis and Game of Thrones actor Emilia Clarke are among those stars of sport, stage and screen recognised in the New Year's honours list, while the Archbishop of Canterbury leads those rewarded for their work of the King's coronation. 3 men who died after a 4x4 vehicle was swept away as they tried to cross a river in Yorkshire have been named by the police. Scott Thomas Daddy, Leslie Forbes and Kenneth Patrick Hibbins were found dead inside the vehicle after it became submerged in the River Esk near Glaisdale. Police say the tragic incident was caused by hazardous weather conditions that had badly affected the roads in the surrounding area. NATO is monitoring the situation as Poland says Russian missile is likely to have entered its airspace. According to the head of Polish armed forces, both Poland and NATO's radar systems spotted an unidentified aerial object over the country's territory. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says that the military alliance stands in solidarity with Poland and that it remains vigilant. It's understood groups of soldiers are performing on-the-ground verification of the missile's flight path. And here in the UK, the government has promised to send around 200 air defence missiles to Ukraine after Russia launched a massive air attack overnight. Officials say 31 civilians have been killed and at least 120 injured, following a series of attacks on critical infrastructure and military facilities. One person in Scotland has died following an outbreak of E. coli. It's after the UK's Health Security Agency confirmed it's currently investigating 30 cases across England and Scotland to identify any potential links to that brand of cheese. The Food Standards Agency has announced a precautionary recall of 4 products from Mrs Kirkham's Lancashire cheese because of a possible E. coli contamination. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's time for headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look at Saturday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle and on my comedian panel tonight, GB News answer to Jake and Elwood, it's Paul Cox and Josh Howie. How are you both? Good Christmas?
Yeah, not bad. Andrew, yourself?
Well, you have children, so it's all about them, isn't it?
It is all about them, so it's about outlay. Although 5 times the outlay for Josh.
Yes. But the good news is that one of my kids' presents arrived today. So that has been what's dominating.
I'm sure there were no complaints at all about the delay.
Yeah, he was. You know what? He was just cool about it.
Was he?
He was just like, no,
Blimey.
not at all. He has literally asked me 1,000 times to check the tracking on my phone. It's been a nightmare. And now, fortunately, I don't need to speak to him now. He's got the present.
OK, well, let's have a look at the front pages first. OK, the Daily Mail is running with most poignant honours of all. The Guardian is running with courts and NHS will not recover until 2030s. The Telegraph has UK ramps up Ukraine arms after Kiev attack. The Mirror is leading with heroes and zeros. That's the New Year's gongs. And the Times has got sent jogging by the boss to keep you fit for work. The Daily Star, hey, nice beavers saving Britain. Not sure what that's about, but we'll get to it in a moment. Those are your front headlines. OK, let's begin with Saturday's Telegraph, Paul.
Yeah, UK ramps up Ukraine arms after Kyiv attack. So this is UK rushing air defence missiles to Ukraine after recent Russian bombardments. The Telegraph understands the announcement by Grant Shapps, of course, who's the Defence Secretary, was brought forward over fears that Moscow could strike again over the New Year holiday. So I'm almost ashamed to say that I'd slightly forgotten about this conflict.
Well, you would. I mean, there's been an awful lot else going on. I think we have a tendency just to assume that if it's not in the news, it's not going on.
Which is mental, obviously. And
you're talking about my son's delayed present.
That was the other
distracted all of us, Josh. But this is, I mean, a lot of this is to do with apparently Ukraine angering Moscow over this sinking of a Navy vessel in Crimea.
Yeah, they do get angry, Russia, about the whole fighting back in a war situation type attack, don't they? The cynic in me, and he's deep in there, I wonder why this is coming out now, because this has been rumbling on for some time, and of course we've had the Christmas break when we had it. I don't know if you heard about what's going on in Israel and Gaza, but...
well, that's one of the reasons, I suppose, that we've been focusing on that, because that's been dominating the headlines, but rightly so. And then you've got this other conflict, which we've sort of forgotten about.
Yeah, and I wonder why, just at this particular moment, it's come up. I don't know if it's some sort of distraction. I'm getting very cynical.
They had a massive attack over there.
They did.
But basically... using a British missile, they managed to shoot down they destroyed a warship.
Right.
So that cost 2.5 million. Destroyed a Russian warship. That's amazing economics there. Which warships cost billions or hundreds of millions. And in revenge, Russia has attacked the Ukraine, but like the civilian population. And also there's this idea that because Ukraine are making these kind of incremental advances on the battlefield, this is to sort of draw attention away from that. And
so wait, you're saying this was a target on a civilian population?
This is what Russia's been doing. They just unleashed this very damaging missile attack thing. So this is why they're doing it, because they need to have more anti-missile missiles.
Okay.
It just feels that every now and again, this feels like Ukraine are doing well. But I was only reading a story last week that made out that Russia has clearly have won the war, and it's just a matter of time.
I never know. I hear conflicting reports continually. I don't think we'll know until this thing is over.
Right.
Anyway, we're going to move on to Saturday's Guardian. Josh, what are they leading with?
Courts and NHS will not recover until the 2030s. So this is an IPPR study, which is the Institute for Public Policy Research. And they're saying that basically, if Labour gets in, it's still got a huge amount of work to do because of the last 13 years of lack of investment in our services, NHS and the courts. Even the courts are saying, even if they manage to kind of reinvest the money that's necessary to turn it around, it's going to be till like 2033.
I mean, at least
get back to where we were.
I don't even think the NHS has always had a backlog. I don't think you will clear it within 7 years' time.
It did well under New Labour. They put the money in. It made a massive difference. And ever since, I mean, this is a cycle that we've seen. We saw what happened under Thatcher and then John Major and whatever.
Yeah.
The services got worse and worse. Schools got worse and worse. Underinvestment.
Yes.
New Labour got in, spent billions fixing it up. We got to a place and everyone went, oh, everything's all right now. Let's get Tories back in. And then they basically underinvested for the last 13 years. And now we're back to where we were. Labour's going to come in and invest for 10 years. And then it's just going to repeat.
So isn't this the point, Paul, that ultimately, if you want the NHS to work, you have to fund it?
Well, this is it. Quite clearly, the story is expectation management. We know that, particularly as it's in The Guardian, we know that this is the sort of story they would favour. It's basically saying Labour cannot do anything to improve the NHS, whether they get in or not, and it's probably going to be the next government after Labour, whether that's Labour again, that are going to be able to.
They said they can improve it. They just can't get it back to where it was.
However,
so it will improve over the next.
It's not the way Labour have been talking for some time. I would hasten to add, because Labour talk, I mean, they never tell us what's within their policies, but they do make out that there's silver bullets just lying to be shot.
See, I don't know. There is stuff in here about their policies. To be fair, it isn't just investment. There are issues about how the stuff is run, and also there's, the demand is much greater. We have a much larger population now.
I mean, I think everyone has felt this shift. Like, if you try and get a GP appointment now, it's now you have to solve puzzles. You have to kind of like it's really strange. You have to phone at the exact same time every day, and even then you don't get through. Then they do this thing called triaging, which they never used to do.
No,
like, this is all new to me.
You know what? If I to be not nice to the Tories, let me just say that the failing seems to be not like this kind of evilness. It's more just the lack of ability to plan ahead. Everything is constantly dealing with a crisis as it occurs, as opposed to you have to think this thing through, plan 10 years ahead and make the investments then. There's no point turning around afterwards.
OK, we're going to move on to the front cover of The Times. Paul, what are they leading with?
Sent jogging by the boss to keep you fit for work, Andrew. So life coaches and running clubs to get people back to work. So ministers launch Work Well scheme to help reduce numbers signed off, with job centres encouraged to refer people for advice and therapeutic.
Well, that doesn't sound so bad. I mean, I think a lot of people who are unemployed do get into that slump of just being inactive, and it's a kind of cycle then?
Yeah, it feels a bit like they're just saying just run it off. But the more you...
No, I don't think that's what they mean.
But the more you read into... No, it certainly did to me when I read the first few paragraphs. But actually, of course, all of this stuff is linked to mental health and getting out and about. Let's not forget, we've got this perception that everybody who's out of work and has been on job seekers allowance, and there's a record of 2.6 million people out of work because of long-term sickness at the moment.
Yes.
We've been sort of told this trope that they're just lazy and they never want to get back. That might be true for a percentage of them, but for many of them, they've just got in a rut. So the idea of this is to try and get them out of that rut by introducing exercise into their life.
Life coaches, Josh, are you a sceptic?
No, not at all. I think that this is a holistic approach.
Okay.
They're not sort of talking about one size fits all here. Some people need exercise, some people need psychotherapy, whatever it is. The point is there is an issue here where they're talking about it increasing by 75% by the end of this decade, £93 billion a year. That is not sustainable for our system. These people need to be back in work. We need to encourage people, and if whatever they can do, they can do it. It's, again, too little, too late. I don't know.
OK, let's finish this section with Saturday's Mirror. Josh, what are they running with?
Heroes and Zeros. This is the Heroes farce. This is what they say. Basically, because the Mirror is complaining because it didn't put through the people that they've requested.
Wait, this is the New Year's Honours List?
New Year's Honours List.
Can you just clarify this for me? Because I wasn't clear why Liz Truss has been able to choose...
Well,
I mean, she was barely...
her right. Well, no, of course. I mean, that's what the real story is here.
Yeah.
Is other papers have come... There have been famous people who deserved it and whatever, but the idea is here is, yes, she allocated one peer for every 4.5 days she was in power or whatever. She has a right, as Prime Minister, even though it was a short time.
But I thought it was current Prime Minister.
To allocate... Well, no, you do it as you leave, like you're leaving leaving honours.
I see.
So this is the thing. So she put that list through. There was talk over the last year or so, you know, of her, 6 months of Rishi fighting this list and saying, come on, you're taking a mickey a little bit. But actually, he's just kind of snuck it in the New Year's list, New Year's honours, so now it's come out and all these billionaires have got...
OK, Paul, can I ask you about this? Because I think when it comes to... If you're Prime Minister and you're choosing the gongs, wouldn't you be a bit more strategic than rewarding people who've given money to the Conservative Party? I'm just saying, because here it says John Moynihan provided over £50,000 to Liz Truss's leadership campaign, and he gets, is it a peerage he's getting? He's getting one of the honours. Yep. Now, if I were Liz Truss, I'd be thinking, maybe I should just hold back on that, just from a PR perspective.
Usually, I would 100% agree with you, and you're completely right, irrespective of whether I do or not. However, usually a Prime Minister gets longer than 49 days in power.
Yes.
So she's basically repaying all the things that she probably promised during that very short tenure.
But that's what I mean. Should it be the case that the honours are a means to effectively repay people who've supported you?
And I think that's why Rishi Sunak has chipped away at this list, because this probably isn't the full list that she submitted initially. This has been chipped away at, and then it's been allowed.
Maybe it is, but also remember, Rishi will probably be doing his own list soon enough.
Yes, OK, fair enough, yeah.
That wasn't a joke, by the way, I should feel, because I had to put this up. Because I know we have a problem, some people in the audience, not our normal audience, of course, but some people watching the show don't know whether we're joking or not. So I thought I could do this to say that...
Oh, that's quite a good system. So whenever someone makes a joke, any quip, you put that up, and then they will realise it's not to be taken seriously.
Sorry, we should explain to people on radio, I'm holding up a sign saying joke.
Yes,
so I can say not a joke, joke.
Yes.
COVID's real, no joke, you know, whatever. Meltdowns.
So, OK, great. Good. Well, we've got that system in place. Thank you for that. That's the front pages that we've dealt with. But join us in part 2 for an old idea from Tony Blair, a new idea about mental health, and we'll find out why prison isn't very good for your career. Don't go anywhere.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Saturday's news. I'm Andrew Doyle. I'm still here with Paul Cox and Josh Howie. We're going to start with Saturday's Telegraph and more evidence that Labour and the Tories might have more in common than they like to admit. Paul.
As they often do, particularly around election time. Blair government wanted to house asylum seekers in camp on Isle of Mull. So former Labour PM, as if we didn't know, also considered Falklands Islands and wrote to illegal immigrants saying, just return them, the archives show. So this is basically harking back to 2002, where, by the way, the monthly average was 8,800 immigrants. Now that's like...
Yeah, so nothing like it is now.
Now weekly.
But correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we have an article about 3 months ago where there was a big uproar because it was revealed that it had been considered that they might house asylum seekers in, I think, one of the Hebrides, one of the Scottish
Lee
islands.
Anderson said exactly the same thing.
Right.
Almost in the same way. What, at this point...
So, but does that mean that every successive government has thought of this as an offshore
Labour
solution?
could argue, if you're a whip or for the Labour Party, or you're in the Labour Party and you're trying to defend this, you'll say, yeah, but Tony Blair looked at this and dismissed it because it didn't come to fruition. However, it's dressed as a gotcha moment. It is a gotcha moment in the sense that we've got Tony Blair advising Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer's coming out saying the Rwanda plan's rubbish.
Yes.
We would never think of something like this, or certainly would never do it in this way, only to find out that 20 years ago his Lord and Master...
That's not what Keir Starmer said, I'm sorry. Keir Starmer's not said that. Keir Starmer said, we will do something like this, but we'll do it a different way, which will be legal and will actually go through. That's
Once he sat back and saw...
So wait, Josh, are you saying that Keir Starmer does support some kind of offshore...
That's what the Labour have been talking about, and they've been... So there's two things that I think are important here that are interesting about this.
Yes.
Number one is, this is encouraging in that Labour has been aware of this issue for a long time, for 20 years or so, pointing the fact that this isn't immigration, illegal immigration, is not a left-right issue. It's an issue that needs to be sorted in terms of just our sovereignty, but also finances and whatnot. So what's happened is, of course, the left have moved further left, and would say that even Tony Blair isn't actually left-wing.
But Tony Blair never said he was left-wing.
Well, you know, but I think he would say he's left.
No, I think
he would say he's centrist.
I think he would say he's on the right of the Labour Party, but I don't think he would.
No, but I'd say overall he would say he's left-wing.
No, I don't think so. I think
you think he really thinks he's right-wing?
No, I think he's quite adamant that he's not left-wing. Like, he's never claimed to be.
Well, I mean, it depends. I guess we're arguing here what you think of left-wing. I'm talking far left. I would say he thinks himself.
I think he thinks himself as a centrist.
Well, okay,
probably.
But anyway,
and all winners are.
And the other thing is, it shows how even though this was stuff that's been written down and talked about 20 years ago, it's still not sorted.
But this
it's a perennial issue like housing.
But it's part of the problem that whenever Labour talks about immigration, it gets a big backlash from within its own support base. This happened to Ed Miliband, you know, and it's as though Labour can't really address the immigration issue because when they do, they get too much flack for it.
Of course. I do... Unusually for me, I really do disagree with Josh on this. I think Labour have been very performative about this issue, and they realise it's going to become sort of the main pole in the tent to win the general election.
Do you mean that they haven't been specific enough in terms of what... I've seen a lot of talk about we will solve the migrant crisis, the small boats crisis, but I haven't heard any detail from some.
Prior to the Tories talking about Rwanda and third party, this is the first time we've heard anything from Labour. Now, I agree with Josh that since it's failed for Tories, Labour has said, well, we could do a similar thing, but we'd do it differently.
Yeah.
However, I think they've been very performative on this, and they're making it out that they've got the solution, and no one's got the solution. And this hasn't been through its feasibility yet. I think this is a valid solution. The third country.
I mean,
I think so.
I mean,
because it needs to be a deterrent.
But the Rwanda plan has been a shambles.
But the reason why Rwanda didn't work is because it wasn't judged a safe country. If they could find a safe country, and they're talking about Albania, and they're talking also slightly differently about processing like having the UK system set up within that country to process, as opposed to just dumping everyone in Rwanda. But it's interesting here that 20 years ago, he literally wrote down, Blair, we must not allow the ECHR to stop us dealing with it. So this issue has been going on a long, long time. Exactly the same dynamics have been going on.
Yes.
And it's interesting that, like I said, it hasn't been dealt with, whoever.
That is interesting. OK, right, Saturday's Times now. James Daly is blaming society's ills on the parents.
Yeah, crap parents at fault for struggling children, says Tory MP. This is for Bury North. James Daly.
Is there any need for that sort of language?
Well, he says that more politicians should have speak more straight shooting, like Leanne. He's part of the group with Lee Anderson. They're, what are they called? New Tories or New Conservatives? Yeah. So they're the new Tory. New
Have we not heard this phrase before?
What does that mean? That politicians should just have more trash talk?
I mean, be more plain speaking. I would argue the best Tory, she isn't. I wouldn't say she's plain speaking, but Kemi Badenoch, I think, is the best communicator.
I think she is
for the Tories.
Yeah.
But I think, frankly, he's right that bad parenting is a problem in terms of what we're seeing for struggling children. But what he doesn't identify is why there's bad parenting, and there are two reasons. Number one is just economics. People have jobs, two jobs. It's very hard to do parenting and parent well when you're off out of all day. And number two is because people's own backgrounds, if they had bad parents, that cycle just repeats itself. And that's why you had something like Sure Start. The whole point of Sure Start, which was brought in under New Labour, the right-wing government, is that the point was they would deal with this issue early, get to kids when they're 4, 5, 6, and stop that cycle repeating. What happened? The Tories closed down Sure Start. So you actually did see an impact. And I worked for Sure Start, so I know I was in there, and you would see the difference it made for families. And I think it's devastating that the Tories closed. I think that's one of the worst things that the Tories government did.
But do you think... I'm kind of surprised to hear you say it. Do you think that family values then, the whole thing that John Major was pushing with the Back to Basics campaign, that actually is something that we should be pushing for?
I think that there's something that needs to be acknowledged, that having two parents makes a massive difference to your outcome. That's just I mean, having two parents who are together makes a big difference to the... That's reality.
It sounds like a conservative view.
Well, it might sound, but I don't think that that's necessarily what he's talking about.
No.
He's sort of... I think he isn't actually getting to the grips of why there is bad parenting.
So why is there bad parenting, Paul? No, I wasn't saying you are a bad parent.
It just made me laugh the way that you phrased the question. Look, there is bad parenting because parenting's not easy.
Well, that's what I think.
So, you know, I mean, I'm a parent. Josh is a parent. And so, this sounds very Labourish now, but as a society, we're all parents. You know, I don't know if you've got nieces or nephews or godchildren. You know, we all have a responsibility here. I think there is an element of this sometimes where you do need to be cruel to be kind. So this sort of very basic language does cut through.
Yes.
What it does, unfortunately, is it takes one part of the problem and chucks it under the bus. Now, we do need to tackle that. I absolutely agree about Sure Start, and I think back to basics was the start of the stuff that New Labour introduced. And there are all good policies. The thing is, they cost money.
Yes.
It all takes up resources. So that's why I talk about I don't usually talk in this way, but the collective responsibility for making sure society brings up children correctly, and that is back to basics.
I mean, is it the case that poverty explains bad parenting?
Possibly.
It has a big part of it.
We've got a lot.
Because then the struggle is harder.
But it's not just poverty. It's cultural issues.
Yeah.
It's unfortunately physical abuse being repeated through. You know, when I was working for Sure Start, you'd see files, and it was the same cycle over and over again. At 13, someone would get pregnant, and you would see, like, within 40 years, like 4 generations, 3 generations, and it would be these thick files, and it would just be very few families. If you could put your resources onto these families who have these historical issues, it makes a big difference.
OK, very interesting debate. OK, let's move on to The Guardian now. And it seems that being an MP isn't all remote working and subsidised bars.
No, it's certainly not. I didn't know who to talk to. MPs on the hidden toll of their mental health. While a handful of politicians have openly discussed their stress of the job, the scale of the problem appears to be far greater. Now, I think it's worth pointing out at this point that this is within The Guardian, who don't exactly hold back when they're having a go at Tory MPs. And it's the same for, probably the Telegraph and the Daily Mail the other way around. However, this is a serious issue.
Yeah, but the trouble is, Paul, that when you do run for office, you have to accept that you're going to be held up to scrutiny because there's no other way, actually.
No,
for a democracy to run, you have to be able to scrutinise.
So I would say it's not for the faint-hearted.
No.
And it is all about strength of character. And unfortunately, that sort of stoicism doesn't really exist anymore. It's not valued in the same way it used to be. We capitulate probably too quickly.
But I also do have sympathy, and I always have with MPs, because I do think it's a really hard job.
Oh, yeah.
And I know we can all be very critical about the people who are kind of like vocational MPs. They're not vocational MPs. They're careerist MPs, and that sort of thing. But even then, the amount of work, the amount of pressure, the amount of public scrutiny, it's really not. Surely, it's not an easy job.
No, and there are ministers who are quoted here, and so I think their workload is even greater, and you have that responsibility. Then they're talking about their constituents, and then if you imagine if the thick of it or something has
if it's anywhere near
40% truth of people screaming at you and the abuse and the fear and also I think for some of them it sounds like what a few of them who are quoted here basically say, I got into this to make a difference, then I realised that the system's rigged, so now I take drugs and just
the stuff
crazy.
I hear about...
I'm reading between the lines here.
No, but there's...
putting up the joke, but that's the gist of it.
There's something to it. I've spoken to a couple of MPs who have told me about the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. You wouldn't believe the kind of Machiavellianism, the nepotism, the games playing, the Shakespearean kind of power plays. Like, that stuff is real. Of
course.
And it sounds like it's just a job I would never want to do.
No, we put MPs, celebrities, well-known people, we put them on pedestals and we judge them... We judge them by a paradigm that doesn't exist.
But also, on top of that, there's the extra toxicity now we have of online stuff and of just politics in general going down this much more sort of polarised routine. And you have something like Mike Freer, who's the MP for Golders Green. He had his office suspected arson attack. He's been getting threats for him defending Israel, a democratic state. And but that's not to say we know if that's what it is. But
and we know that these online threats can be real.
But certainly his office has been burnt down.
Absolutely horrific. OK, Telegraph now, and a politician suggesting that another politician isn't doing a good job. That can't be right.
No, crazy. Scotland moving politically backwards under the SNP, says Alex Salmond, who used to be the leader of the SNP. Basically, this is Alex Salmond being just the jilted ex, and he's just dishing all the dirt. And he's angry and he's bitter and he's saying, he doesn't give it to you like I used to in Scotland.
On the other hand...
That wasn't a joke, let's do that.
On the other hand, he has got a point, hasn't he? If the SNP's raison d'etre is to achieve independence from the UK, right? Just statistically, in terms of the polling, under Alex Salmond, they were doing much better in that particular cause than what happened under Nicola Sturgeon and subsequently Humza Yousaf.
This is an amazing thing that has happened. He is right, of course. They have governed terribly, but it needs to happen. The SNP has to implode for the good of Scotland because it's a one-party state, and for the good of the UK. because it just doesn't work having this like one issue to run your entire country.
No, and it also means that other issues get smuggled in, like the trans issue, like the gender ideology issue, which was never supported. The majority of Scottish voters did not support the idea of men in women's prisons, but the SNP railroaded it through anyway because the majority of MPs supported it, you know?
Scotland deserve better than the SNP.
Leo Kearse.
Scotland. Yeah, maybe. I mean,
well, he did run, didn't he?
He did run. Yes. See, they should have voted him in. And,
well, alas, we can't force people. We can't force comedians in.
If only we could.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be called a dictatorship. Look, Scotland deserve better. They're raison d'etre, as you rightly say, for the SNP and the Labour Party. Let's face it. Is Scottish independence. But what they've tried to do is get it through by any means possible, by using any populist idea floating around.
What they should have done was just be a really good party. And maybe they could have
lost all integrity now.
Do you know what? If they'd have governed better, then maybe things would have been... Anyway.
I think that's essentially what he's saying.
OK, well, then he's probably right. OK, well, that's it for part 2. So join us after the break for Sobriety tags, the Pope's liberal journey and the Ricky Gervais controversy.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Headliners. We're going to start this section with the Telegraph news that prison is not the best place to do your master's degree.
Well, who would have thought it, eh? This is Andrew Malkinson. Remember, he was the guy who was wrongly jailed for rape for 17
horrible story.
years. Actually, the biggest part of that tragedy is the guy that they had the DNA for that proved that it wasn't Andrew. They had that in year 3 of his sentence, I read today in this story. So 14 years of that sentence. This is why there's a huge investigation going on.
Well,
by the way, this is not the story.
Well, how did it get held up, out of interest?
There is now an investigation going on to find out why. I don't know
that's
why.
Shocking. But in this case, while he was in prison, falsely imprisoned, he was effectively studying for a degree.
A maths master's, sort of say.
Yeah.
And much to his surprise, not to mine at all, the staff were not very supportive. They weren't very keen on people doing higher education.
Really?
And they would put obstacles in their way. He makes out, this was on Radio 4, he made this out on the Today programme, I think today, so if you're watching this tomorrow, Friday, the upshot is that he managed to complete this master's, but against the will of the prison, is what he's saying. And
that is really shocking to me, because I would have thought that you would want, as a prison officer, you would want them to be doing stuff like this.
I mean, maybe this, the system might, but we're talking about individual officers.
Right.
I imagine number one might actually think it's a threat to them.
Why?
Because maybe they're going, I don't want this guy to be cleverer than me.
Oh, I see.
You know, like someone to be like snooty and more knowledgeable.
What, just an
it's like me
ego
talking
thing?
to you all the time. It's like it's a pain.
Oh,
Do you know
but isn't the point that you better yourself? If you can use the time to better yourself.
So the system might want people to. And the other thing is that, like any job, everybody just wants to get away with the least amount of work. So they don't want to be like the prison guards don't want to be going to get in a rubber and a protractor. Whatever it is.
I would have thought that's easier than like policing people out in the yard shanking each other.
They want to like smuggle in drugs up their bum and things like that.
I would have thought this is easier. Someone sitting in a library, I would have thought is easier to police than...
he said, by his own admission, he was a nerd, he was studious, he wanted to learn. This was an opportunity. He knew he was wrongly convicted, I guess, and he just wanted to make the most of it.
He was like, I hope I had a really big night out the other night. I hope it wasn't me.
But what I mean by that is, he had less than 1% of people get their murder convictions or rape convictions turned over. So he was, in many ways, fortunate that he ended up with justice on his side.
Well, absolutely. OK, well, let's move on to The Guardian now. And the government are keeping a track of offenders drinking when they go straight. Paul, I had never even heard of this.
No, I think this is really interesting. I'd never heard of it either. So nearly 3,000 offenders in England and Wales wearing sobriety tags this Christmas. So a number of offenders were fitted with these sobriety tags, and the probation officer can tell if they've been drinking, essentially. So it's
because it analyses their sweat.
Yes.
Right.
And it basically... It works on 97% of the people who wear these tags, so it stops them drinking.
So presumably this is when their offences have been connected to alcohol consumption?
I think so. There's part of this. I understand this is a great deterrent. It's probably best to have people that are out on parole or family visits, as they do from more open prisons towards the end of their sentences. It's best to have them sober.
Yes.
You don't really want them to go and cause themselves any more problems. But there's this kind of libertarian within me that just really finds it difficult watching other humans be controlled. I know they're criminals, and they may well have done something totally worthy of being tagged up, but there's something I don't know. Do you feel? Am I just alone here?
No, I hear you, man. But like it says here, 39% of all violent crime in the UK involves alcohol.
Yeah,
and that's including domestic abuse, and especially during the festive period. So it makes sense. I get you. This is about control, but arguably, when someone's committed crimes, the onus is on preventing further crimes, certainly violent crimes towards other people. So, like in all of these things, you have the rights of the individual versus the rights of society to have to deal with somebody with an alcohol problem.
And wouldn't they presumably want this? Because they don't want to go back to prison. So, and if they're aware that alcohol is the thing that stimulates...
So there isn't any kickback, other than me making some sort of libertarian comment about controlling humans, which, of course, some humans need to be controlled. I'm not,
Well, prison is a form of controlling humans.
And I agree with prison. So, no one's kicking back at this, and this seems to be working very well.
And if you... Sorry, go on.
I was just saying, I noticed they don't do it for weed.
No.
Or anything. Because that...
Well, it doesn't cause that crime.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is they're not going to have, like, a weed detector.
No.
They're just going to be like, oh, yeah, you're chilled.
Yeah, and if it's a choice between controlling someone's alcohol consumption, which I agree does deprive them of a certain degree of liberty, and locking them in a box, which is worse.
All the liberty gone, yeah.
All the, maybe this is
No,
better.
I think you're right.
OK, let's move on to The Times. And Labour attacking private schools, Josh.
Yes, I think it's the Telegraph here.
Oh, is it the Telegraph? Sorry.
We're going to lose a third of parents
But like, we will lose a third of parents. The private schools facing closure under Labour's tax plans. Labour's proposed 20% VAT tax on top of private school fees, which is not presently charged. The idea is that that money would then be put into the national education system. And then you've got a lot of private schools here going, oh no, they've got £30,000 a year, they're going to be charged an extra £6,000. My argument would be, if you can afford that level already, now they're saying that like a third of their pupils might have to go.
Yes.
I think they're over-egging it a little bit. I think
that's surely not true.
I feel like there are a lot of super rich people out there, and another £6,000 is... If you can afford 30 grand, you can afford 36 grand.
Yeah.
That's to my mind.
That's probably the case. Although I keep hearing those sort of... I've read a couple of articles of parents saying, oh, we've really struggled to put our kids through private school.
We can go skiing this year.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
We can...
do you know what? You'd probably imagine me on the panel as kind of this sort of working class...
Don't imagine it.
No, don't imagine it. It's actually true. I have never held any resentment about anyone who's gone to a private school. I think it's an aspiration. And it's an aspiration that should be available. And of course, aspiration is the enemy of socialism. I'm not a huge socialist by any stretch of the imagination. So I feel like I always want to push back against this stuff. There probably are families that do struggle to pay the 22 grand a year to put this in. And if it's to go up to 30, and we all know that it does give these kids a distinct advantage. Don't know if either of you two went to a private school. I never benefited from it. Did you?
Yeah, mate.
Yeah, and you benefit. We've ended up in the same place.
I am so thick.
You're not thick. You're not thick.
No, but my level of entitlement keeps me, you know...
No, but I think, you're right. You will have had a better education than us because I taught at a private school, even though I didn't go to a private school. So I know the difference is there's quite a chasm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think more than the education level, the teacher standard or whatever, it's just you get this kind of like, oh, listen to me, because you get...
Confidence.
Confidence, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't even know the word confidence. But
you embody it.
Yes, exactly.
We know you've got loads of
the confidence. Having a big willy.
OK, let's move on now.
That's not true, but that's a joke. That was a joke. Don't quote me. Metro, do not come to my house and measure me, OK? That was a joke.
OK, we're still with the Times now, and the Pope is on a liberal journey. Soon he will be off to Bali to find himself, probably.
Yeah, it's looking that way, isn't it? He is 87. Pope Francis shows little sign of slowing down on his liberal journey, as you said. So despite his health scares and being 87, he continues to confound his conservative critics.
Yes.
Now, whatever you might think of the Catholic Church, maybe even this Pope, the bedrock of Catholicism is its consistency with the word of the Bible.
Yes.
And what Pope Francis in particular seems to be doing, for better or worse, and I'm not drawing a judgment on that, is reinterpreting the Bible to bring the Catholic Church into the 21st century, into this progressive era. And I don't know if that's such a good thing. I think one of the values of being within the Catholic Church or the Protestant Church or the Jewish faith is there is a bedrock on which you rely. And to try and make that progressive...
I disagree with you in that the Catholic Church doesn't base their stuff on the Bible. They base their stuff on the Synod or whatever it is. The rules that they made hundreds of years later. So this is them, there's nothing in the Bible saying that priests or holy men can't be married, for example. That is purely a Catholic Church creation. In fact, the Torah, the five, it's all about procreation. So... rabbis famously have a lot of kids, so...
But there is stuff in the Bible about homosexuality, for instance.
Yeah, and that's 100% right. Joke!
There we go.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, Pope Francis, I don't know how liberal he really is. I mean, he hasn't said anything, to my mind, that's really contradictory.
He thinks that the age of consent should be over 13.
Goodness sake. Go on, Paul.
No, he seems to be less against homosexuality than
the
previous
Catholic preaching has never been that homosexuality itself is sinful. It's that the act is sinful, not because of homosexuality, but because all sexual acts outside of wedlock are sinful. That's the reason.
It's lesbians.
I promised myself I wasn't going to say this, but I fear that Pope Francis is a little performative.
Really?
I do, just in...
You don't think he means what he says?
Well, he may well be. I don't think he necessarily means it. I think that it's a committee-based system, and they're saying the things they think other people want to hear.
Well, wow. And unfortunately...
I believe that.
But also the ordaining of married men as priests, that is, unfortunately, he's not going to be tackling that during his papacy, so that's me out. I'm very upset about that.
Yeah.
I was ready to go.
Sorry. Never mind. Well, that's the end of part 3. Don't go to bed yet, because in part 3 we'll be discussing Google's big mistake, dangerous diets, and Generation Z's taste in entertainment. See you shortly.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Saturday's newspapers. The Metro now, some people finding Ricky Gervais offensive.
What? Ricky Gervais thanks whiners for making controversial Netflix special a huge hit. It's becoming a sort of yearly event now, really. He releases a special, everybody whines, all the far left and wokies and crankies and whoever goes, oh my God, this is disgusting, and it becomes a big hit. I don't think it's become a big hit because they're whining about it. I think it's just because people like it and it's funny. I haven't seen this year's one. I saw the last one. I haven't seen this year's one because my friend, who I've been stealing her Netflix, it got cut off and then her dad died and I haven't been able to ask.
You shouldn't really be admitting that on...
Okay, well, my dad, you know what, my dad won't even lend me his. What do you think I should do, right? You think I should pay for it?
I think that, yeah, I think avoiding theft...
I like Ricky Gervais, but not that much.
Well, what about that? I mean, Ricky Gervais has said Armageddon's huge. Thanks to everyone who loved and raved about it, and of course everyone who hated and whined about it. You all played your part. There is a case to be made. I mean, I've seen some of the way people are tweeting about it. It's like they are. The anger is even worse than last year. I think every year they get more and more intense and more and more insane.
I wrote a sort of provocative tweet about it yesterday, sort of pointing out, you know, the fact that this is a meritocracy. The judges of his comedy are his audience, which are huge. I also believe that Ricky Gervais is the perfect comedic anecdote for our times because, as we were discussing in the break, He's uncancelable.
Yeah.
He's got a massive audience. Now, you can argue to the cows come home, and I'm more than happy to, whether he's the best comedian in the world at the moment. That's very subjective, but he's certainly the most successful right now. And one of the reasons he is he goes at subjects very straight.
Yeah.
Very straight. He holds that mirror up and he says the thing you're not expected to hear. The type of thing that made us all laugh when we were young lads, and people would say, you know, it's the element of surprise.
Yeah.
There's an edginess to it. I hate to use that word. I don't see him as some edgelord. He's cleverer than an edgelord. He's not deliberately trying to. He is provocative.
There is a refreshing element to it. I mean, the clip that went viral last year was when he was talking about the trans issue.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant.
Well, it was incredibly insightful.
Yeah.
Because it was a perfect bit of comedy because it had his cake and ate it in terms of, and it was obvious by some of the like using turf, or, you know, he showed the aggression of these people who are basically advocating for male rapists to be in jails and whatnot.
What worries me is the literal mindedness, the inability to just say, look, that's a joke that isn't to my taste, so therefore I just won't watch it, rather than going and screaming and saying he should stop. And I don't understand the leap that you make psychologically from something that's just not your cup of tea to I must stop everyone else from listening to it.
This is words is violence. Words is violence because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about control. And you say they're more frenzied this year because they sent all the tweets last year, they showed all the stuff. And we see every year we have this James Acaster clip of him calling out supposedly. Now, James Acaster, I think, is a brilliant stand-up. Like, if you've seen his specials, like his hour, they are brilliant. The clip they show is one of the most pathetic bits of, and not even comedy, it's just like, it's him being performative. And someone said something that I thought was very incisive today on Twitter. They said the thing that fails about that James Acaster bit, where he's basically, oh, look at me, like taking the mickey out of edgy comedy and whatever, is that actually, in terms of talking about trans issues and whatnot, is that this whole punching up, punching down thing, which I hate anyway and I don't agree with, it's like saying that you're punching down if you're discussing about trans people, but the reality is a lot of what we now understand, or what they're trying to say trans people are actually men who are fighting to get into women's spaces. Now, that isn't punching down if you are then calling that out.
Yes, because, I mean, Ricky Gervais is talking about this phenomenon of women's single-sex spaces being depleted. So, in a sense, to defend that even comedically, well, is punching up, isn't it?
I would say so. He also has, I have seen the special this time, I think it's a very good bit about the immigration issue, and I think anyone who's seen it would say there's a pretty good bit as well. And it's a good bit because it's right. We've got this whole Emperor's Clothes situation going on where we're not allowed to say certain things, and Ricky Gervais,
especially on this channel.
Well, exactly. I mean, going back to the people who dislike it, they're just not happy being critics.
Yes.
They want to be dictators. So they'll not say I don't like it. They'll say I don't like it, and I don't want anyone else to watch it either.
Yeah, well,
that's a step way too far.
I think that's the fundamental problem with it. OK, we're going to move on now to the Metro and an expensive breach of trust at Google.
Yeah, Google settles a £5 billion claim, $5 billion claim, should I say, over searches for intimate and embarrassing things. So
Japanese women.
Lovely. So Google has agreed to settle a US lawsuit claiming it's, I don't know where that lovely came from, secretly tracked millions of people who thought they were browsing privately through its incognito mode between 2016 and 2020. Now, they're talking about each person that's made a claim will get $5,000. The idea is...
Wait a minute. The incognito mode, everyone knows that doesn't actually mean that they can't track you.
What?
Well, this is the point.
Josh,
this is the point. The reason they're able to be successful is that's exactly what they thought. And they're going, well, you've called it incognito. I thought we could have some special alone times without the wife finding out. And it turns out...
It doesn't go on your search history, but it's still... Google still have the
of course. They can, the idea that a big tech company like Google are going to do something to help their users is
well, I think this is a charming article because they very quickly they just say they're like, oh, now people are going to know what your hobbies are and what you like to eat and what you watch. Come on, we know what we use that incognito for.
OK, show's nearly over.
Japanese women.
Let's have a quick look at Saturday's front pages. So the Daily Mail has the most poignant honours of all. The Guardian, courts and NHS will not recover until 2030s. The Telegraph is leading with UK ramps up Ukraine arms after Kyiv attack. The Mirror, heroes and zeros. That's the New Year's honours list. The Times, sent jogging by the boss to keep you fit for work. And the Daily Star has, hey, nice beavers saving Britain. That's all we've got time for. Thanks so much to my guests, Paul Cox and Josh Howie. Steve Allen will be here tomorrow with Cressida Wetton and Nick Dixon. And if you're watching at the 5 a.m. repeat right now, then please stay tuned because it's time for breakfast.
Japanese word!
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast. There will be some frost around tonight before wet and windy weather arrives in time for the weekend. That's in association with a deep area of low pressure currently out in the Atlantic. This will sweep its way in across the UK as we go through the next 24 hours or so. Ahead of that, some quieter weather for a time as many of the daytime showers ease and clear away, leaving some clear skies for many, but a very wet and windy picture towards the far northeast of Scotland tonight. Under the clear skies, particularly towards eastern parts, likely to turn quite chilly, a touch of frost in the south, a widespread harsh frost across parts of Scotland. So a bit of a frosty start first thing on Saturday morning, but then turning increasingly wet and windy as this system makes its way in, pushing northeastwards as we go through the day. As that rain hits the cold air over Scotland, we are likely to see some significant snow, could see more than 10 centimetres in some places over the higher ground, could cause some travel disruption here. Elsewhere, an unsettled picture, but quite mild towards the south, highs of around 12 Celsius. Looking ahead towards New Year's Eve, and for many it is going to be a blustery day, strongest winds towards the south, risk of gales here, quite a few showers around, but a calmer picture across Scotland, some dry weather here and mostly light winds, though again towards the far northeast it is looking wet and windy. As we go into the beginning of the new year, it actually looks like it will be largely dry, but that may not last that long. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
So welcome to another brilliant show. We're back here at the Golden Diamond Club here in Ashfield, the award-winning Golden Diamond. And we've got a very special guest on tonight. That's former Cabinet Minister Edwina Currie. Also, our lefts at the bar are Matthew Larser. He's up in Ashfield again. We've got Lisa McKenzie and trade unionist Andy MacDonald. And Emily Barley will tell her heartbreaking story about the loss of her child at Barnsley Hospital. But first, let's go to the news.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Poland says a Russian missile likely entered its airspace. According to the head of the Polish armed forces, both Poland and NATO's radar systems spotted an unidentified aerial object over the country's territory. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says the military alliance stands in solidarity with Poland and that it remains vigilant. It's understood groups of soldiers are performing on-the-ground verification of the missile's flight path. Here in the UK, the government has promised to send around 200 air defence missiles to Ukraine after Russia launched a massive air attack overnight. It comes as Rishi Sunak condemned the Russian president for the latest bombardment, saying Putin will stop at nothing to eradicate freedom and democracy. Officials say 31 civilians have been killed and at least 120 injured following a series of attacks on critical infrastructure and military facilities. One person has died in Scotland following an outbreak of E. coli. It's after the UK Health Security Agency confirmed it's currently investigating 30 cases across England and Scotland to identify any potential links to a brand of cheese. The Food Standards Agency has announced a precautionary recall of 4 products from Mrs. Kirkham's Lancashire cheese because of possible E. coli contamination. The family of a man who was killed while trying to save a stranger in Sheffield says the tragic circumstances show the sort of man he was. Chris Marriott went to the aid of an unconscious woman when she was hit by a car which had ploughed into a crowd of people on Wednesday. She's in a life-threatening condition in hospital. A 23-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder and remains in custody, while a 55-year-old has been released on bail. Witness Tarek Naily says people were fighting in the street beforehand.
I found a lot of people gathering around and screaming, and a car crashed into the sign next door, and a lot of fighting over there. I think 6-7 people fighting each other opposite side, and there is one guy in his 20s. His face is full of blood, and one woman lying down beside.
A British woman and her son have died after an avalanche swept through the French Alps. The 54-year-old and her 22-year-old son were skiing with family on Mont Blanc when the disaster occurred. A search and rescue mission involving around 20 emergency workers lasted 5 hours. Authorities say another person, believed to be an instructor, escaped with minor injuries. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Lee Anderson's Real World.
I'm delighted to be joined tonight with Edwina Currie, former Cabinet Minister. Back in the day, Edwina, things have changed over the years. I mean, you got into politics, what, 30-odd years ago? If you was around today, a little bit younger, would you, put your hat in the ring and stand for Parliament again?
I hope so. Yeah. I hope so, because in the end, if you want to get things done, if you want to get things changed, if you want to help people like yourself or people in an area where you're living, then politics is the way to do it, and being in government is the way to do it. I was very lucky to have that opportunity. I was able to do that. And it was fascinating, it was interesting. You know, every day's different. I could never work in an office. I could never do a normal job. But politics for me was wonderful.
But back in the day, Edwina, I suppose it was more of a man's world in the House of Commons. Look around today, it's about 30% of the people in the chamber that are women. And I suppose it's more accessible now for women to get into politics. How difficult was it back in the day for a woman to get into the House of Commons?
Well, imagine if you were one of 23 blokes in a house of over 600 women. You might feel a little outnumbered, mightn't you?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you might enjoy it, but nonetheless, you would feel that's really strange. And that's how it was for us. The year I got elected, first time was 83, which was Margaret Thatcher's second big result. It was after the Falklands War. And that was when we had a huge majority. And even so, we had 23 women in the House. We had 13 Tories and 10 Labour, and none of the others, you know, the Liberals or any of the others had any women at all. Now, I know we had the Prime Minister, but even so, it did feel odd. On the other hand, I've been involved in politics for a long time. I've been helping to run the city of Birmingham. I come from Liverpool. And I was used to being, you know, the only woman in the room, or the only woman in the room who wasn't going to do the washing up, you know what I mean? And that meant that I would sit at the table and I would argue and I would talk, and I would find myself still in the debate with the men long after everybody else had gone.
Well, it's great to have you, Edwina, but we've also got some other people in the room tonight. We've got our lefts in the corner. Well, I say lefts. We've got Lisa McKenzie. She's an anarchist. We've got Andy MacDonald, who's a trade unionist, and Matthew Larzer. He's going to talk about 13 years of Tory rule. Thanks, guys, for coming. I think what we're going to talk about now, women in politics, Edwina. Do you think it's right that political parties have all women shortlists?
No, I don't, and I've always thought it was wrong. And I'll tell you for why, because people who have felt discriminated against, as women did, should never, ever practice discrimination against anybody else, which is what an all-women shortlist is. So it's far better to do what I think David Cameron did originally when he was in opposition. He was opposition leader. He was trying to get more women into the Conservative side. And what he said was, when you do a selection committee, and I've sat on loads of them, you must have equal numbers of men and women candidates coming forward. So that means you've got to make the effort to get more women or more underrepresented groups. And that's the way to do it, because then you're nurturing people, you're encouraging, you're tapping somebody on the shoulder and saying, oh, I hear what you say. What a great... Have you ever thought of standing for Parliament?
I can see Matthew Larzer, he's staring into space over there. Over to you, Matthew.
No, I'm afraid, I mean, Edwina is a great pioneer in politics and a great example for people to get, for women to get involved. But all women shortlists have their place. They are the reason why the Labour Parliamentary Party is 50-50, and hopefully they will, over time, won't be needed. But at the moment, they have their place.
Yeah, but the trouble is, of course, the standard problem with this is, if, as a woman, you get through the list and you're only competing against other women, then you're not competing against all comers. And, you know, with the greatest possible respect, I think this is proven by the fact that a heck of a lot of the women you've got in the Labour Party are absolutely useless.
Oh,
well, I certainly disagree with that.
Over to you, Lisa.
Well, look, I actually agree with you. I don't think there should be all women shortlists, just because I think for us, the party political system is the problem. So you might get an all-woman shortlist, but every one of them is sort of a shoe-in, or at least one of them is a shoe-in that the political party want as the MP. I mean, you know, we're in Sutton in Ashfield. I've seen this happen for 40 years here, you know, that Westminster sends their people. So it doesn't matter if it's an all-woman or all-man shortlist. You know, the political party will make sure they get what they want.
Hello, I'm sat here, Lisa. I wasn't parachuted in.
No.
Andy, over to you.
I mean, I don't agree with all women shortlists. I think they're fundamentally flawed because, you know, like Lisa said, they'll get who they want, really, particularly in certain parties coming up to elections. They want to have their central HQ candidates in key seats like Ashfield and these kind of red wall seats that both parties want to have. But I think there is a place, like Edwina said, actually, to ensure that there is at least half women, half men, or if you're going on a racial kind of thing, if there's half BAME, half white, you know, I think there is that space to increase that kind of demographic in Parliament because it's needed. or at least it has been needed historically.
So, Matthew, that's 3-1 against. If I was
It's
counted...
GB News, I'm used to it. But I mean, seriously, Lee, I mean, you know, you worked for an MP here who works for GB News, who was selected by an all-women shortlist and did a great job representing Ashfield. And we campaigned for her together.
They would all make great MPs. Why don't you stand?
Yes.
Why don't you stand?
Lisa wants to smash the system.
Yes, exactly. I don't want this.
You can't smash the system by sitting on a bar stool.
No. Well, I don't know. I mean, you can do a lot by sitting on a bar stool. But no, being a member of Parliament would not be my...
If you want the best people in Parliament, and you look at the ones that are there now, and that applies whatever your political party is, and you think, do you know what, I could do at least a good job, you may well be right.
Yeah.
In which case, put yourself forward. Start off perhaps in local government, stand for the council, learn how to run things locally.
Absolutely.
It's not as easy as it looks from sitting on a bar stool, but by golly, it's a hell of a lot more worthwhile.
Well, look, Edwina, next year we should have a general election, maybe by the end of the year, almost definitely. And the Labour Party are 20 points ahead in the polls. They seem to think they've got it in the bag. The thing that concerns me, if they do get the keys to number 10, is momentum. They're bubbling along under the surface. We've got some trade unions who are making some nasty noise at the moment, your Mick Lynch's of this world. Is it a problem? Are they still there? And will they influence the Labour Party once they get in?
Of course they're still there. Of course they're still there. What you believe doesn't change, especially very deeply held beliefs, even if they're complete nonsense, even if they are actually against the welfare of the whole nation, as obviously Momentum is. But I grew up in Liverpool. I mean, you know, Momentum by another name was there. Militant, it was called. Militant. I went to school with people like Derek Hatton. And you'll get a mixture of people. You get people who are very sincere and really do believe all the Marxism and all the other rubbish. And you'll get some who piggyback on that, who see opportunities for power. And when you see both of those sprinkled through the current benches of the Labour Party, if they get into any form of power, they're going to be very dangerous for our country. Because what they will do is give in to every strike that's going. They will give in to the railwaymen, they'll give in to the doctors, they'll give in to the teachers. Inflation then becomes rampant. And we know this because it's happened before. And then you find that the people who are most disadvantaged are the poorest in society. That's
Matthew,
what would happen.
rampant inflation.
Well, we didn't have that in the 13 years of the Labour government that we had. And instead, we've had 13 years of failure. I mean, Edwina, you're doing a great job. You're on the left of the Tory party. And you must be embarrassed by the shower that we've got at the moment and how they're behaving. So, no, look, what's happened inside the Labour membership is that a lot of members have left. Over 150,000 people have left. About 100,000 new people have joined. Keir Starmer has taken an iron grip, which I think might actually be a point of contention amongst with certain people in the trade unions, an iron grip on the selection procedures so that the next generation of MPs who will be coming in the election, even in seats that Labour only has a 50-50 chance of winning, will be in the Starmer mould. And so Momentum has no power. It loses elections internally all the time. Of course, there are always a few people from the traditional left in the Labour Party, just as there are people on the far right of the Tories.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why you bring up Mick Lynch. He's not affiliated to the Labour Party.
Exactly.
The RMT is not affiliated to the Labour Party. They haven't been since, what, the late 80s, early 90s. You know, they actually
But you see Labour MPs
party.
on the picket lines with them.
Yeah, in solidarity to him. You know, I think it's actually, if you're worried about the leadership, Keir Starmer stopped any of his front bench going out on the picket lines. So I think if you're looking at that as a point of contention, that's not real. If you look at the internally elected democratic committees in the Labour Party, the NEC, the National Policy Forum, the Young Labour, the Labour Students, they're all to Keir Starmer's mould, the Labour to Win faction, not the Momentum faction. So you're just lying. They're not
Lisa and Edwin before
you're lying.
I mean, listen, I don't think the Labour Party is... my interest in politics has always been about working class politics, working class representation, working class people's lives being worth as much as anybody else's. Now that's what
the Labour Party's there for, Lisa.
No, it's not.
Look at Angela Rayner.
No. The Labour Party has not been for working class people since, I don't know, the early 1970s. The Labour Party...
Say that to the millions who benefit from the minimum wage, which the Tories opposed, which Edwina opposed in Parliament.
The minimum wage was actually a cop-out, because what it did is it stagnated wages for about 15 years. So the minimum wage was Tony Blair's way of keeping Labour cheap. So, you know, let's not put have nostalgia about the Labour Party.
See, Matthew, you're upsetting anarchists now, aren't you? Edwina, over to you.
That's my role. They're splitting hairs, and that's because they're sitting on the bar stools at the bar. That's what you do when you sit like that, and you're not getting really involved. At local level, for example, in constituencies like mine in High Peak, we can see the very left wing of the Labour Party very much active. I take what you say about the NEC and the higher levels of the Labour Party haven't been taken over by Keir Starmer, but at local level they are still there. They're still there. They are choosing candidates. They're the ones that go out door knocking. They're the ones who made sure, for example, that I didn't get elected to the county council when I stood a couple of years ago, that sort of thing. And that's also where you get that flicker of anti-Semitism and nastiness that has had to be clamped on very, very hard. It's just under the surface. Go and have a look at some of the people who went on the marches recently.
There were certainly people who needed to be to leave the party, and they've left the party. Keir's been absolutely firm and clear.
But they've not left the party, though, Matthew.
They have. Look at the list of people who've literally been thrown out.
No, I haven't not left. They're still party members.
No. A lot of people have anybody who's all the cases have been processed, and anybody who should have left has left. I mean, you just ask our Jewish comrades who were unhappy, quite rightly unhappy during Jeremy's leadership, now think that Keir's done absolutely the right thing, and it's the Jewish Labour movement that I listen to on these issues.
The Labour Party and actually most of the trade unions now are full of sort of middle-class bourgeois left. So, yeah, I'm sorry, not all of them. Not all of them, but actually, I mean, even Mick Lynch, they asked him whether someone who earns £100,000 and got £1 million mortgage, are they working class? Mick Lynch said yes. So I don't know where I don't know what is going on in the TUC, in the Labour movement and in the trade unions, but I know not one of them talks the language of class for me.
I think we'll end it on that note, because that's a good point, Lisa. I actually agree with you. But Edwina, thanks for that. Guys at the bar, Lisa, Matthew and Andy, thanks for that. It's been a brilliant debate. More from Edwina Curry shortly, but first we're going to talk to Emily Barley about the heartbreaking story of the loss of her baby back in 2022.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Joining me now is Emily Barley, who sadly lost her baby Beatrice in May 2022. I know Barnsley Hospital have apologised for failures. But Emily, tell us what happened.
Yeah, I think often when a baby dies, people have an impression as though it's a chaotic environment and something terrible happens all at once, and maybe staff that are overworked and, you know, make human mistakes. That's not what happened to us. What happened to us is that I was ignored for hours, hour after hour after hour. I was dismissed as though I was being a dramatic first-time mum. When I was raising concerns because my labour wasn't normal, midwives were rolling their eyes, shrugging their shoulders, turning away, just not listening, which meant that some really, really important red flags were missed. And then as my labour went on, monitoring of Beatrice's heart showed that she was struggling, and then it showed that she was dying, and nobody did anything about it. It was as though they were fixed in this opinion that everything was fine and I was just being dramatic, even when the evidence was showing it really wasn't okay. And in the end, that meant that when we should have been rushed to theatre for an emergency caesarean, instead, that didn't happen, and I had 3 midwives and 2 doctors in the room, standing around doing nothing. Just a few minutes before they found that Beatrice had died, the consultant obstetrician was laughing.
I guess going through that, you must have felt helpless.
Yeah. I mean, being in labour and having a baby is such a vulnerable time anyway. And to be asking for help and not getting any, and nobody listening. I had my mum with me there as my birthing partner. She was brilliant. She was not just asking, she was telling, demanding, shouting in the end. And just being ignored. You really are just in their hands, and there's nothing that you can do.
Emily, what do you want to happen now? I know you've got a campaign going. What's your end goal?
So I've joined together with a load of other bereaved families from all over the country, because my case is what happened to me and Beatrice is far from unique. It's happening everywhere, all around the country. So we've joined together to call for a statutory national public inquiry to really understand not just why this is happening, but why it keeps on happening after all the local investigations and all the national schemes and everything else that's been tried. It's just not working. And now, pretty much every day of the year, a baby dies because of negligence in the NHS.
And when you're going through that difficult labour and you're making these observations, these complaints, why don't they listen to you, Emily? Do they know better?
I think part of it is that they do think they know better, but there's a real culture of complacency, a culture of not listening to mums. I think as well a culture of not really caring, and that's not just among clinicians, that's all the way up the chain through the NHS, chief executives of hospitals, people at NHS England, people at CQC. They kind of tolerate this. They think it's normal, like babies just die sometimes, and they don't.
But let's be clear, I mean, most people that work within the NHS are good, decent, hard-working people. They save lots of lives every day, and we never see the headlines that Kingsmore Hospital saves a life. But when we hear the tragic, heartbreaking stories like this, it brings it home, because I'm actually dealing with a case not too dissimilar to this in my constituency, where I think negligence has cost a couple of parents their baby's life. And this is critical, really, because for pregnant women, for new mothers, for new fathers, this is where where life starts. And I think sometimes maybe that the maternity department at hospitals, because they see that many babies being born, it's like, it can be like a production line, can't it? And they should have picked those signs up, surely.
Yeah, I think they do often treat labour as though it's normal, there's nothing to see here, no problem. But it's actually, you know, being born is one of the most dangerous, riskiest times of anybody's life. And in the past, you know, before modern medicine, loads more babies died. And we shouldn't be expecting babies to die now, we should be expecting them to live. But instead, there is this culture of complacency, there's a culture of not listening. And it doesn't just result in deaths of babies. Every year, hundreds more babies are brain damaged because of negligence. Mums suffer horrible physical injuries. And I think actually a lot of mums, when you speak to them, they might have come through labour and birth relatively okay and their baby's okay, but they didn't have a good experience and they weren't treated well.
So this campaign that you've got going at the moment, how do people get involved with that campaign?
We're called the Maternity Safety Alliance. Find us online. You can help us by pledging your support, writing to your MP. Yeah.
Have you wrote to your MP?
Yes.
Are you getting plenty of support?
I am from my MP.
OK, that's good news.
We've written to the government as well, and so far we've been ignored. Coming up on 2 months now and not a single response.
OK, so I guess what you need to do is call your MP again, even write to me. I can take that up for you as well, even though you're not my constituent, I'll definitely do that for you. So if you've got one final message for the, I'm not having got the staff at the NHS because they're brilliant, but the actual managers, the trust managers, the directors, the people on these huge salaries, what would your message be to them?
You need to get a grip of this. Babies dying is not normal, it's not OK, and you can't just keep on accepting it.
Emily, thank you for sharing your story. Thanks, darling.
Thank you.
Next, Edwina Curry returns as she's going to be taking some questions from the good people of Ashfield.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
So we've got all my guests on the stage now, it's great. We've got Edwina, we've got Lisa, we've got Andy, and we've got Matthew. We're going to talk about real poverty. Now, we could speak about back in the day what poverty was really like growing up in a place like Ashfield. Lisa knows that, and Andy knows that. But I remember back in the day where we didn't have much money. We didn't rely on food banks. You know, a lot of people grew vegetables, had allotments, relied on that as our top-up for our parents' income. So we didn't consider ourselves being in real poverty. I can remember clothes. We used to buy clothes. My mother's here. She used to buy clothes from the catalogue, pay about 70 pence a week for a new jumper. I think yours would cost about 2 weeks, Andy, that jumper there. Matthew, let's go to you first. Real poverty.
Yeah, I mean, look, real poverty does exist in the country, and it has got worse under the 13 years of this Tory government, Lee. And you, as you well know, of course we can discuss real poverty. Is real poverty not having Netflix? No. Is real poverty not having a TV and having the basic amenities of life that people can expect in this day and age? Then yes, so of course it's the definition of what real poverty is changes as the country's got richer. But of course it exists and it's got worse.
Edwina.
Yeah, well, I think many older people remember when, for example, you'd wake up in the morning and there'd be ice on the inside of the window pane in your bedroom. And you didn't know what a duvet was, or no such things.
It was a continental quilt, do you remember?
Well, that was it. I mean, I'm not
a minute. Your name's not Edwina.
Sorry.
And we used to get the stuff that used to come from Canada, had cousins in Canada, and they would send a whole box of hand-me-downs, and that's what I get to wear. And wrapped inside it would be bits of chocolate and stuff, because we had rationing till I was 9 years old. So older people really, we're not dismissive of the problems that people have today, but we have experienced far more. And Lee is quite right that actually it's often relative. It's what you get and what you've got compared with other people. To me, real poverty is something quite different. Real poverty is when there's no dad there. When the family, the dad's gone. The moment the baby has arrived, he's off. The women are left on their own with the children and having to struggle. Real poverty is when those kids are going to school and there's not a normal family life there, and they find that really, really tough. Real poverty is the sort of story that you hear from kids in care.
Lisa,
that's real.
You
that's
grew up in
real
this area alongside me.
Yes, I did. Yeah, and when I grew up, I mean, I grew up in the 70s, we had ice on the inside of our windows. I lived in a council house.
Ours was worse than yours.
My granddad, I lived with my grandma and granddad, and my granddad worked down the pit, and he was digging coal, and I still lived in a freezing cold house. In fact, my overarching...
They had free coal.
What, free?
Yeah, they had free coal.
They were digging it. They were going underground. And
my miners had free coal.
And it wasn't free coal. It was part of their wage.
It was a concession.
It was part of their wage. But, I mean, you've got poverty. So you've got absolute poverty. That means when people die from their poverty. And then you've got relative poverty, which is about how you measure people, you know, in relative. And for me, poverty should be defined as people should have a life lived with dignity. And if that dignity is taken away from them, either through debt or not having enough food, or your kids being sent to school not with enough stuff, you know, whether it's food or clothing or whatever, that's not living a life with dignity. So for me, if you're not living a life with dignity, you live in poverty.
So I guess there was plenty of poor people back in the day when Edwina was growing up, and definitely my mother, back in the 40s and 50s, they had no money at all, but they lived a dignified life. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Mansfield, in a different day to you.
In that jumper?
In this jumper. No, this is 2017 Next's finest Christmas line. I don't know why you're giving it so much hate. It's beautiful. No, I grew up in Mansfield. I didn't grow up in Sutton or Ashfield, but I grew up in a bit of a different time. But you know, Edwina talks about people freezing in their homes in the 70s and 80s, and a little bit earlier, I think.
No, it was earlier.
A bit earlier. I would never assume. But you know, looking at that time, but technology has advanced. Why are people still freezing in their homes now when we've got all of the advancements, you know, even just looking at the different glazes of windows, you know, you've got different types of central heating. You've had such a technological advance, yet people are still living in similar ways.
In fact, doesn't hold you there, Andy, because someone in the audience is shouting out. We've got a lady here who wants to talk about poverty.
Yeah, I mean, I've lived in this area for 30 years now. I grew up in Derbyshire. And, you know, I've got a friend that runs a local pub in Selston, the Railway Inn, and they're certainly not seeing poverty. If there's a difference between being poor and not having money. You can be poor and still go out and enjoy yourself. The real people at the bottom end of the line that are suffering from poverty aren't coming to venues like this or going to the local chippy. I mean, Leo know our local chippy is packed every Friday night. They're queuing down the streets. That's not poverty. So when people talk about poverty, they need to think about, well, do I need that or do I want that? There's a difference.
She's actually right, though, because we talk about poverty, but the takeaways, the chip shops, the McDonald's, the KFCs, they're...
Well, it's because they're cheaper alternatives.
Well, they're not cheap.
McDonald's, you can get a full meal for $3.99.
Well,
that is objectively a cheaper alternative.
Well, let's talk about food poverty. Let's talk about obesity. We talk about the junk food that's readily available now, the fast food places. We're saying... We're telling people that half the country's in poverty, our kids are starving, yet in the next breath, the same people are saying that we've got an obesity crisis. And we have got an obesity crisis. How does that work, Edwina? You're a former health minister.
How does it work? It works from people eating too much. It's as simple as that. And I can say that with a bit of a smile, because I'm the only one at this table that's got a diet drink on it. And that's because yesterday I went to the Slimming Club, and by God, it's still with me. I've got to be careful. Oh, my God. It matters. I mean, as a former health minister, we used to campaign on all this stuff. I wish health ministers did that rather more. Yeah. That they would say to people, live your life to the full, enjoy yourself. But if you're going to eat a lot, you've got to walk a lot, you've got to exercise, you've got to get out. That's what you teach your kids. Eat some fruit, get some vegetables, all that sort of thing. Yeah. Live a balanced life, and you will live a healthy life.
Matthew, I'm going to come to you. I'm not having this nonsense about junk food is cheaper than fresh food, because it's not. We proved that in an experiment a couple of years back by getting fresh ingredients with a chef and with children in the food bank. We was making meals. I've got the tab 30p Lee, but we made 172 meals for 50 quid.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that was a very controversial intervention, but you're right. I mean, one of the things that we don't do in schools now is we don't teach people how to cook. It's a subject that's fallen off the end of the school curriculum, and it shouldn't have done so, because it is obviously cheaper to make your own meals than go to McDonald's or to the chippy. But that's not to say that people shouldn't be able to go to McDonald's now and then, even if they're not very well off, because kids need to, experience what other kids are experiencing. But yeah, I mean, it's a mixture of taking responsibility for yourself and the government taking action. I mean, you need both. It's not an and/or situation.
Sorry, guys, we've got somebody behind the bar, the lovely Zoe. She wants to ask a question. Zoe?
Well, I'd just like to pick up on the point of the obesity crisis, and the biggest problem that we've got within the NHS is the food pyramid. It's upside down. What they're telling you to stay away from, what's causing the weight gain, is the amount of carbohydrates they're recommending daily. And if you turn that upside down and eat what they're telling you to stay away from, solved.
They are a lecture on keto.
Absolutely.
Is she right, Matthew?
Well, as we know lots of people like Gloria, who used to be the MP here, who thrive on keto. I don't do it because it's...
Obviously.
Thank you very much. Oh, Lee! Now I'm going to ask you nasty questions when in the yes/no quiz. Look, I think it's about people taking responsibility for themselves and the government making sensible policy decisions, but you can't have one without the other.
But that's exactly the sort of line that I was taking, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
all those years ago.
But can I...
And you were brave doing it. You've got a lot of abuse for it.
But can we also just put a spotlight on the food producers as well, who are...
Force us to eat all this food.
No, they're banging in sugars.
You don't have to eat it. Nobody makes
When it's the cheapest alternative.
Do you know what?
I'm sure on your MP's pension you can afford whatever you'd like. You get to go to the Waitrose in Buxton on your pension. But for a lot of people, the worst food is the cheapest.
Yeah, can I speak? Listen.
It's that jumper. It's gone to his head.
I know. So George Orwell in 1984 wrote about miners' food. And the Daily Mail in 1934, I think it was, criticised what coal miners were eating, because they said that coal miners were having too much fuel on their fire and they were putting too much sugar in the tea.
It's about 70 years ago.
Yes, and you know what? It's
about now?
Well, I'll tell you what. Well, let me speak, and I'll answer
Nobody's
that.
forcing you to eat the sugar.
So what George Orwell says is, if you were a miner and you've been down the pit all day, when you come home at night, shouldn't you have something warm and sweet?
Yeah.
And it's and you know what? If you're sat in
And that's why they had no teeth, Lisa.
Well, no,
is.
no, that's not.
true.
That's not true. That's not true.
It is true.
People need to. Don't you think that I'm not?
Where are your teeth?
Listen,
You were
food,
around, weren't you?
I'm not
yeah,
saying.
but food is not a reward. Food is a fuel.
But people treat it as a reward.
Well,
and we've got big companies. We've got big companies that are banging sugar in everything, are putting.
It's quite patronising, Edwina.
Why? What is she saying?
She's giggling away into the camera. I think that's quite patronising.
What am I doing? I'm so sorry. I'm trying not to say.
Look, guys, I think we need to calm down a little bit now.
Why? What are you saying?
I'm trying
Security
not
are in
to
the building.
say.
They may have to come to stage. It's a
Right.
fascinating discussion. But thanks, Edwina. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Matthew.
So this is the festive treat, not just for me, but for you at home as well, where I get to turn the tables on Lee and his infamous yes-no quiz. He's the one who's going to be doing the answering, and I'm not left in the corner for once. So remember the rules, Lee. 5 questions, yes-no answers, and you're only able to qualify 1 of your answers. So let's kick off with, do you think the gap is too big between rich and poor?
No.
I was going to say, if I was that slow, you'd kill me. Do you think Mrs Thatcher is a heroine?
Yes.
Do you support Keir Starmer's plan to use terror legislation to stop the small boats gangs, to smash the small boats gangs?
Yes.
And will Parliament only be truly representative of the country when it's 50% female?
No.
And finally, we're speaking just after Christmas, did you do your fair share of the cooking, cleaning and other housework over the festive period?
Yes.
Were your fingers crossed for that one? And so which one would you like to qualify?
Well, all of them, really, but I can only go back to one about being representative in Parliament. If it's 50-50, it can't be representative because 52% of the population is women. Simple as that.
Oh, technicality, Lee.
Well, there you go. Next, it's time for last orders. And on the poll with trade unionist Andy MacDonald, Lisa McKenzie, and the pub landlord, he's back, Gary Melvin.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion.
Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So back in the day, in the pubs around Ashfield and Nottinghamshire, going back to the 70s, 80s and even early 90s, every Saturday night, the cockle man would come in the pub with his big tray with salt, vinegar, cockles, whelks, mussels and crab sticks. So I'm delighted to be joined by one of the last few remaining cockle sellers. This is Dave Bartram. Nice to meet you, Dave. Thanks for
Very
coming
nice to meet you.
So I believe you've been at this game for 50 years.
Yes, I'm in my 63rd year.
63rd year. So how often, we don't see the cockle men very often now in the pubs, not in Ashfield. Are you still out and about in Nottingham?
I had a beat up. Now, I want somebody, I'm still doing it with big shows, you know, people that want little parties or something.
Yeah.
I make the stuff for them and they go to the party.
Okay.
But all I want is somebody willing to carry a basket to carry it on.
Can you make a living at it?
Well, I worked for Harry Tenby to start with, Tenby Seafood it was. Then he went to Spain. And me and my late wife carried it on. I mean, when I started with Harry, all he did was give me a basket.
Okay.
You find your own pub. So I found all the pubs in Nottingham. And then when I started on my own, me and the wife did a year on our own. And then we got more pubs. So we started in, you know, I had 7 staff, 250 pubs in a big Americana by the time I'd done.
So on a Saturday night, we used to look forward to 2 things in the pub, apart from obviously boozing and yeah, chatting to your mates. But there were 2 good things in Nottinghamshire back in the day was, they used to come around with the football post.
Yeah, oh, yes.
The paper with all the football results in. We used to look forward to it. I used to print it the same day, actually. Just an hour after the final results go in, you're reading the paper. And the cockle man used to come in, but that's disappeared, hasn't it, Dave? And it's, I'd like to see it come back. Do you think it could make a comeback?
I've got 5 stars on my basket. Now, when I started, to start with, it was man and wife pub. They used to say yes or no. And you went in and carried on from there. Then dawn come. And then food come, you know?
Yeah.
And it knocked it back.
Yeah.
I mean, I still do a lot that still do food.
Yeah.
They still let me in.
Yep.
You know, because I was there first.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, the Trip, the Castle,
Yep.
the Angel, that's just a few.
Wow. So I like my mussels, I like my cockles, but the only place we tend to get them nowadays is when you go to Skegness for a day or up to Cleethorpes or to Blackpool. I like them to be fresh.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like them to be pickled and such, but I do like them.
Now that is one thing. I won't eat them pickled anyway. I have
been pickled when I've had them. I've had a few. But,
obviously.
Yeah.
But no, mine's fresh.
Yeah.
I pack same day deliver.
Yep. Well, listen, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you, Dave. 60-odd years out with your basket, selling cockles and mussels and crab sticks and everything.
I mean, I've been on stage with Johnny Vegas as a woman.
Wow.
He loves his prawns.
Yeah, yeah, prawns as well, yeah.
And I tell you what, I miss it. You see, well, I miss it. I still go around my village, you know.
And it's good for you as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, listen, Dave, been a pleasure meeting you. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Yeah.
That's Dave Bartram, 60-odd years selling cockles, mussels, prawns and whelks.
Yeah, whelks are the worst. They go off fast.
Fast. They go off fast, remember that.
They do go off fast.
So it's time for On the Pull. I've got Gary, the brilliant landlord. I've got Lisa, she's on the pull. I've got Andy, he's on the pull. I've got to apologise for last week's pathetic performance. I poured a pint of froth. It's not as easy as it looks, Andy. Lisa's good in there. I know she used to work in a bar about 1 million years ago.
All right, thanks.
It's true. It's about 1 million years ago. So you've got your pump, you've got your pipe pot.
Yeah.
We've got an anarchist and we've got a socialist. Go for it. So that's a pretty good start, Andy. Oh, Lisa's making a mess of it.
Hey up.
How long did you work at the pub for, Lisa?
Not long.
I could tell by that pint you poured. Oh, it's a shocker.
Oh,
Dear.
hang on, leave
Andy,
it.
on the bar.
Look at that.
Well, I'll give you...
Leave it to settle.
Gary, you're a potential employee of
Indeed,
the,
yeah.
They're coming for an interview.
Indeed.
Right, they've just poured a pint like that.
Yeah.
I mean, be honest. What would you say to Lisa?
I'd say, Lisa, come back when you're ready.
Yeah.
It's a good job I've got a PhD
no idea.
there.
A PhD in pint pulling?
No.
OK, what about your PhD? Is that in pint pulling, Andy?
It may well be at that. What do you think of that?
All right, no, you've done a good job there, mate. I'll give you that.
So, marks out of 10 for Lisa.
Lisa, that's got to be a 3.
Well, that's one more than you gave me, Gary, isn't it?
Well, indeed. At least there's some beer there.
OK.
Yours was just froth.
OK, I'm the comedian, not you. And, who's the... what
Listen,
about Andy?
that's got to be... I'm going to give him 10.
Wow.
Well, I mean, you might think that's good news.
That's pretty good. Well, you got, what, -2?
We've actually got somebody who got 11.5.
Who got that?
Yeah, well, never you mind. So, but anyway, that's been absolutely brilliant, Gary. Thanks once again for allowing us in this fabulous Golden Diamonds Club.
It's been a
Sutton
pleasure.
in Ashfield.
Enjoyed every minute of it.
700 members, best music venue in the East Midlands, the Cavern of the North. We've got brilliant Lisa's first time on the show. You've been brilliant.
Thank you.
I don't believe a word of what Andy says about you. But it's been absolutely brilliant. Thanks, darling. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great show. Once again, another massive thanks to June and Gary Melvin here at the world-famous Golden Diamond Club in Sutton in Ashfield. A fantastic show, fantastic guests. Listen, have a happy new year.
The silver button's going right down her back. I said, hi-ho, a tipsy toe. She broke a needle and she can't sew. Walking the dog. I'm just still walking the dog. Well, if you don't know how to do it, show you how to walk that dog. Hey, I asked the mother for the 50 cents. I see an elephant, he jumped the fence. He jumped so high that he's touching the sky. Didn't get back till the 4th of July. Walking the dog. Walking that dog. Well, if you don't know how to do it, I'll show you how to walk that dog. Just a walking, just a walking, just a walking. Yeah, babe, I'm just a walking. Well, if you don't know how to do it, I'll show you how to walk that dog. Rock on, rock on.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast. There will be some frost around tonight before wet and windy weather arrives in time for the weekend. That's in association with a deep area of low pressure currently out in the Atlantic. This will sweep its way in across the UK as we go through the next 24 hours or so. Ahead of that, some quieter weather for a time as many of the daytime showers ease and clear away, leaving some clear skies for many, but a very wet and windy picture towards the far northeast of Scotland tonight. Under the clear skies, particularly towards eastern parts, likely to turn quite chilly. A touch of frost in the south, a widespread harsh frost across parts of Scotland. So a bit of a frosty start first thing on Saturday morning, but then turning increasingly wet and windy as this system makes its way in, pushing northeastwards as we go through the day. As that rain hits the cold air over Scotland, we are likely to see some significant snow. Could see more than 10 centimetres in some places over the higher ground. Could cause some travel disruption here. Elsewhere, an unsettled picture, but quite mild towards the south, highs of around 12 Celsius. Looking ahead towards New Year's Eve, and for many it is going to be a blustery day. Strongest winds towards the south, risk of gales here. Quite a few showers around, but a calmer picture across Scotland. Some dry weather here and mostly light winds, though again towards the far northeast it is looking wet and windy. As we go into the beginning of the new year, it actually looks like it will be largely dry, but that may not last that long. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Knock again. Hello? 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 Who is it? We're here for the show. What show? We're filming a television show.
This is a medieval castle, you silly man. It's for besieging and sword fighting. It's not for some so-called television program.
But we made arrangements. A strange person.
I am bored of you. Your auntie soiled her knickers, and your mother was a vacuum cleaner. Huh?
Let us in!
I spit on your gonads, you quarter-witted son of a cabbage hunter.
Is there someone else up there that I can speak to?
Go boil your bottom.
Can you throw him off the ramparts, please?
All right.
Well, I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
Oh, well, Stephen Fry. Stephen, it is lovely to have you here, you silly man.
It's lovely to be had here, if I may say.
I want to know about cricket because you've just become president of the MCC, and he has just shown me this tie. Show the tie.
Yes,
and he
it's an
claims
MCC
it's an MCC
Can you
tie.
zoom in to that little symbol there? It's the device that says MCC, Marylebone Cricket Club,
Isn't that
or 1,200 in Roman numerals. Yes, I mean,
But you
I
have
know.
to be a member to get that.
Yes,
Yeah.
you buy it from the members' shop at Lord's.
So tell me about cricket, because it's all changing. And it's a beautiful, beautiful game. It's still the only game that is very like the one I used to watch in Western Super there in Clarence Park in 1948.
Yeah. Well, that's because we're guardians of the law, the laws of cricket, the MCC. Other games have rules cricket has laws. But each tournament will have its regulations, like
Yes.
where the fielders can be, how far from the bat, and so on. But there are laws of cricket, which are the same on a beach in West Indies, or in a slum in Mumbai with stickball, or in a village in England, or in Weston-super-Mare. Those are the laws of cricket. I mean, yes, it is the same game, but it's like a lot of British institutions. It sent its footprint abroad,
Yes,
and has been reinterpreted and often improved upon, or at least enhanced in different ways.
I was very proud the other day when Afghanistan beat Sri Lanka. I thought, isn't it incredible the reach that this
it's getting wider and wider.
Yeah.
It's the second most popular sport in the world. By quite a long way. Obviously, football is the first, and a lot of that is to do with the fact that it's so... Well, it's the third religion in India. They call it the third religion.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy about it. And obviously, India is about to overtake China as the country with the largest population in the world. So that kind of skews the statistics a bit. But it's the most popular sport in Nepal.
Nepal.
And I'm a patron of the MCC Foundation, and our aim is to spread cricket around the world as much as possible.
Are you going to get into South America?
Yes, that is. That's our next thing. It's not really there. I mean, there's a bit in Guyana, of course. We had Mark Ramprakash and others, and who have sort of ancestors from there. And Guyana provides the West Indies with cricketers because it's Caribbean.
True.
But yeah, we want to if you can find a flat bit. But it's Rwanda, Kenya. Recently, the foundation went to the Lebanon and taught Syrian refugees who are penned up in camps with nothing to do at all, but turned to kind of crime and misery and